10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have ignition.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, How Not to RP-1, the Addendum. I don't remember what we were doing last time, but this time I think we are going to take our last lunar impactor contract, since we have done so well with those in the past, and then start to focus on opening up some comms tech, as well as some avionics. We got to get something researching in the queue. We've got a couple of these science points sitting around that we're just not really doing much with. We're going to start plotting out for the lunar orbiter contract, which unfortunately is going to take a little bit more lifter than what we're currently using. This is what we're currently using, the OV1. We're going to try to do something other than that HA10 by switching out to the RD-0105, which is a Kerlox engine, a little bit more reliable, but still only has one ignition. So if we plan on using this, we basically want to use it as our kick stage to get us out to the moon, and then we can certainly get enough delta V out of either a B or a solid stage with our current payload to hopefully use that to achieve orbit of the moon. This will also mean that we're going to add some RCS tanks, our legendary golden balls, of course. We will be revisiting our payload momentarily here as we try to get some of these things figured out. We're going to try to redo our avionics. I think, well, I wanted to have avionics control, although strictly speaking, it's not entirely necessary, since it will be responsible for just doing a single burn. We can spin stabilize before jettisoning the orbiter from the transfer stage, the RD-0105 stage. And if we orient it correctly on that ejection, we should be able to just come in. Well, we'll be facing prograde across the moon, which means if we add a rear firing engine like this, we should be able to, make orbital insertion happen without the need of having avionics. So we would also like to pack as much science onto this thing as we can possibly manage, because, well, we're kind of limited by battery life at the current moment, in that we don't have very much fit. Our battery tech sucks, and our solar panel tech sucks even more than that. We can save some mass and some simplicity by switching over to a solid motor and using that as our lunar orbit insertion stage. And so now all we have to do is figure out how to get all of this tonnage into orbit, which leads to a series of terrible decisions. This being the first one, just kind of going like, well, hey, let's take our existing booster and let's just copy it over. Maybe we'll put parachutes on it and try to get some of our investment back. Yeah. Very, very poor choice of everything, because we're way over our tonnage limit. So I was trying to do the traditional cheat of fueling on the launch pad, but turns out that only works for fuels that evaporate, like cryogenics, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, etc., etc. Kerosene, no kerosene pumping into the boosters here. So, that plan, not going to work. Not going to work as well as we'd like. Anyway, we can still try to work around it by basically just removing all the liquid oxygen and keeping all the kerosene loaded up. That puts us even empty way above our tonnage limit. So our choice then is to reduce the size of the boosters. But this is me still experimenting and figuring out what can be fueled on the pad, what cannot be fueled on the pad. And yeah, look at that. Liquid oxygen filling up quite nicely. Unfortunately, with all this time passing, there is liquid oxygen bleeding off from the RD-0105 stage that I just didn't really know about. So we're going to take this for a little bit of a test run. We're going to shoot for pretty low orbit, 160 by 160, and just kind of see what the hell happens here. yeah, with basically three very similar three of the exact same core stages running the exact same engine, the LR79, they should all flame out at, close to the same time. But I think we actually have that core stage set to airlight. The problem now is I forgot the avionics. You need avionics if you're going to make this a thing, and knowing how much that's going to suck, we're just going to go ahead and bring the boosters down and try to light all three engines on the ground. It seems that's probably just a safer bet. This is really just like, we need a big extra kick of speed if we're going to basically make our core stage booster attempt to be orbital. So we'll just let things get fueled up yet again. I should have moved those clamps, but yeah, we're once again waiting for the liquid oxygen to be pumped into the rocket on the pad as we dodge our pad tonnage limits. So I didn't really know how much delta V we'd be looking at, but yeah, it's like 5 kilometers per second or something. Oh, that's really only accounting for the LR-101s, the Vernier engines. But silly me, still forgot the avionics. So, boom. We'll just blow up those engines. Yeah, vessel tonnage is like 104, something like that, tons, which technically means we could have it fully fueled on the pad and ready to go. I just didn't. And of course, these avionics are being a little touchy with how they're letting me set them up. But now we have a full complement of avionics. And yeah, we're still looking at about 5 kilometers per second. And yeah, in the time it took to fuel those boosters, our upper stage has bled off a significant portion of its own liquid oxygen. This can be remedied by adding an umbilical tower to the top. I'm just not really used to having to have that direct connection to, counter boil off. I'm used to old school KSP where, if you had one thing connected, it could pump fuel into any tank on the rocket, and often would, even if you did not want it to. If you wanted to launch something not quite fully fueled or partially empty of something, you could do that if you turned the clamp pumps off. Anyway, this test run seems to be going resoundingly well. We are about to hot fire our core stage. Of course, the LR-101s are already firing. That's hopefully going to give us enough ullage on that core stage to hopefully not flame out the engine, as I struggle to figure out how to force roll so that our boosters don't smack into the side of the rocket. There's a solid ignition on the core stage, and kathunk, although fortunately the thing that exploded wasn't crucial. It was probably part of the booster, probably the parachute, and MechJib has the ball and is deciding that with our newfound thrust to weight ratio, we can just dive right into this. And moving currently at about 700 meters per second with another 5.8 kilometers per second left to go in the core tank. Unfortunately, it's just not quite going to be enough, which honestly just kind of sucks, because this would have been the easiest, most efficient way to build something that could handle this, although I guess we could go up on booster count up to 4, or maybe just I could figure out my avionics and we could go back to that first draft design that we had and try to make that work. But honestly, I think we're going to end up spending a lot of money trying to get this lunar orbit contract thing figured out. But I guess the flip side of that coin is if we can put a small package in lunar orbit, it means we can get roughly the same package size, payload size, deliverable to Mars or Venus, which would be, once we have the comms for it, our next goal. And I don't know what the hell MechJeb was figuring out here, that, oh hey, maybe we're not actually going to have enough altitude to reach our target, and we should just start pushing like crazy. It seems really weird that MechJeb made that decision, because now it's shooting way past our apogee. There is fairing sep. Thank you for finally doing something about that, MechJeb, as you blow way past our desired apogee. And yeah, 561 by negative 3.8 something, not in orbit. So the decision was made to invest some money in figuring out a entirely new launch vehicle. So we paid a bunch of money, and we unlocked the R7 core stage. And now we just have to figure out how to get it off the ground. It has like a 5-minute runtime, so we can really go with a pretty obscene booster here. On that RD108 just makes so the long runtime is the big advantage of it. And if you've watched any of my other series, you know that I really do favor a core stage with a really long runtime instead of more traditional American style stack staging. I like to have some boosters that you can just shut off, and then a core stage that does 90% of the work, getting everything into orbit with a pretty good deliverable. So before we tool anything, we're going to try to figure out our booster setup here, and this would have been a good time to revert back to the original core booster from our previous rocket, because then we wouldn't have to tool anything. We'd have maximized runtimes on those LR79s, and plenty of sway to work with. But yeah, once again, we are way above our tonnage limit, so we will be fueling the liquid oxygen on the pad so that I can be a cheater McCheaterson and cheat my way into victory. But running a simulation, of course, all engines do light, and yeah, we have boiled off most of our fuel from our upper stage, so this is really just not a very good test to figure out if this is even going to work, because the mass of the upper stage is like half of what it should be. And so if this makes it to orbit, there's no telling if the fully fueled variant stands any chance whatsoever. But we've slowed the footage down so as to not just kind of go crazy with it. I hope you don't mind that this launch is going to take some time, because we're going to be examining this incredibly stupid looking launch vehicle for a little while now. See, we've gone with a 3-booster design because that was the bare minimum that we could use to get our payload to where we needed it to be, and not gone with the tapered core stage like a more traditional R7 style variant. Although we haven't tooled anything, we certainly have the option to. I'm really not good at replicas, and if you're going to be that on the nose with stuff, then I don't know, maybe you should just go full bore, and I really just don't like doing replicas. So the other unaccounted for variable at this point, the boosters, they have the avionics to basically handle themselves, is the avionics on the core stage, which apparently I did not respec to handle the newfound tonnage of this new booster, which we will have to give a name to. I'm sure I'll come up with something by the time I get back to doing this. Oh wait, no, that wasn't the core stage flameout. That was boosters smacking into core stage and screwing everything up. So we're going to run the sim again and hopefully not stage those boosters off before the engines have flamed out, in hopes that maybe we can, get a smooth ejection this time, and yeah, get a solid test on this one. So this is the flight where I took over manually, because MechJeb jettisoned those boosters before it was supposed to. I think it was assuming they were solids and was kicking them off before flameout, because solids, the thrusts kind of taper off there at the end. So generally something like that shouldn't happen. So this is me flying manually, and you can tell because the flight path sucks and the ascent profile is garbage, but it is fun just to take the stick and fly something manually every now and again. I do absolutely everything I can by hand in my RP-0 series, because I do like to actually fly things. I know it's not realistic, but it's how I enjoy playing the game. It makes me feel like I'm actually a contributing factor in the success or failure of whatever the hell is going on. There is a clean booster sep that went so much better than last time, and now we can just kind of dial ourselves in. It looks like we will be going to space today, although not by much. Another 3 kilometers per second left to burn really does kind of put us on the wire for whether or not this is actually gonna get to orbit, and this is based on the assumption that my flight profile was garbage, so you know, things could possibly be done better if a competent pilot was at the stick. We were able to achieve a 409 by 35 kilometer, not in orbit, but alarmingly close. The problem is, of course, and I know this because I'm in post, and I noticed this much later, our upper stage is not fueled. So we actually still don't have a very good test on whether or not this is actually going to work, but I think this is going to be the direction we are going to go in for our next generation of launchers. And hopefully this will be a derivative of this design. Somewhere in here will be the version that gets us into the orbit of the moon and into interplanetary space for some new and very interesting science gathering. The problem is it's going to take a very long time to build. We don't have a whole lot of science queued up. So we're actually going to run out of things to research, and our program runs the risk of stagnating and running out of funding. So a few last-minute touch-ups here. We are going to stretch the core stage a little bit, and instead of trying to parachute the boosters down, we're just going to stick the avionics on the bottom and give them a nose cone. That's going to give them a little bit longer runtime, but we're going to try to get them, you know, somewhat close to where we need them to be, as well as, you know, making some design changes here, stretching out the avionics, fixing the fairing stuff, just kind of making this rocket a little bit more well-rounded, bring it into its own design element. And while we are goofing around with all of that, we have unlocked the X-15 cockpit, which is fantastic because the X-2 cockpit just kind of didn't exist in this save, so we've been capped at doing our X-Planes flights below an altitude of 30 kilometers, which has really limited the amount of contracts we can take and things we can do. But now we can actually do something about it. And by do something, I mean we're going to take the absolute cheapest route ever and bring out the airframe from our X405B ox cart, make sure the engines are of the spec that we want, and just gluing it to the X-15 cockpit. Now, we really don't need the film canister, and it does kind of offset our weight balance a little bit. So we're just going to ditch the cameras for our first couple of flights. But yeah, other than that, this thing is pretty much out of the box, ready to go. Except for we need a landing gear. And we should probably put at least one scientific-y thing on this. So after we straighten out our landing gear here and get it nice and tucked up and get this thing back to a profile that makes me happy, which Kerbal Space Program just isn't really very friendly about that. Yeah, there's our nose gear. Nice, even, tucked in, looks sleek as hell. I love this airframe. It's one of the ones that you just put together in 45 minutes and it just works, and we're going to prove that it works so well we're going to continue it across yet another generation of Kerbal killing aircraft. Perfect. So we'll make sure our science is queued up. We'll actually bolt a TV camera onto the bottom because they're lighter and generate pretty significant returns for what they do, and then get this thing in the build queue as the X406. Now, time finally for something that is not a simulation. As I said at the beginning of the episode, we are going to try to do one last lunar impactor contract. This is our third lunar impactor. We've actually had lots of success doing these contracts. I think we're 2 for 2 on punching the moon with science. So we're going to take that contract a third time. The first 2 times through, we were able to complete the lunar impactor and the lunar flyby contracts together in one fell swoop because you can't hit the moon without getting close to it first. So, you know, qualified. This time, however, we don't have a lunar flyby contract available to us. We have only the lunar impactor. So we're basically going to repeat the same flight that I think we've done the past 2 episodes of this series. We're just going to up ahead and do it again because, well, the streams in which these footages recorded contained a lot of, well, stupidity. And most things went horribly wrong for us. So I really wanted to end the stream by putting something in the W column, and hopefully we could make some money for our space program, because we've not been doing a very good job of generating money that we can use to further our endeavors. So booster had a clean launch. We're a little low on things, but burned through the booster cleanly, and we were able to separate stages and fairings without overheat, although altitude on that did appear to be a little low. So we will start to ullage in that HA-10, and man, I really hate it, but sometimes so much rides on whether or not that HA-10 will light, and if it will make it all the way through its burn. If it does, these early HA-10 engines are just kind of notoriously bad. I mean, you could say the same thing about the early RL-10 engines. They seem to have a spectacular failure rate even when you get them up to their full data points, but fortunately for us, the HA-10 has lit, and it is going to push our package the rest of the way to orbit, unless of course it decides to just quit halfway through, but we're really just kind of hoping that's not going to be the case today. Because like I said, we'd really like to put something in the win column today, get us some money, keep the program kicking along, and help us further our endeavors, and hopefully get a booster that is lunar orbit capable, if not interplanetary capable, would be the ideal situation here. But it is not an insignificant runtime on the HA-10, a minute and some change, I think. And as we round it out, there it is. 160 by 159.992, because MechGem just really hits those numbers pretty well. So now we can resort back to human control. Of course, we just have the B stage left. So we basically need to dial this in for 3209. Well, 3,209 meters per second. And if we can dial that in pretty exact, we can just let the bee fire and do its job, and we'll just smack into the moon. So by tipping our maneuver node around a little bit, we can try to just leave our delta V figures alone. Maybe we can just touch it up just a little bit to see, you know, where do we have to light this engine to burn for exactly 3,209 meters per second that will get us an impact with the moon. Yeah, let's say we're a little over, so we're going to try to come in on the other side of the moon so we can, I don't know, maybe have comms or something this time through, but there's just lots of poking and prodding and pulling at nodes, trying to get this dialed in as exact as we can. And there we are, within half a meter per second. That gets us an impact with the moon. And of course, we can touch things up fore aft on our RCS. We don't need avionics control for docking lateral translations if you use the H and N key. Just a quick little tip there. And we'll get ourselves angled in now. Unfortunately, we do not currently have connection to a ground station. That was the one thing I kind of forgot to check for when plotting this maneuver node, is will we be over a comms relay when it comes time to light that engine? It would be, you know, nice to be able to actually send commands out to our spacecraft in order to do these things, and lucky us. Bump, we have just bumped into comms range, so we will start our spin stabilization and our engine ullage maneuver while we wait for that countdown clock to get to about 20 seconds out. Yeah, this little stage, thrust to weight ratio nearing 4.5, will put out that 3 kilometers per second in just a hair under 40 seconds. So we basically get right up on top of the node, get this thing spinning as best we can, start to ullage in the engine, and then yeah, we have to just wait until it's stable, and then ba-boom, away we go. So now this mission rests solely on whether or not an Taerobee will not fail on us. So I've just made sure that our science is in fact turned on. Whoop, and overshot by just a little bit, but this is why we have the touch-up RCS thrusters to bring us back in. Boop, there it is. It'll be a nice glancing blow to get us all the way to the moon. but hopefully we'll get some good science radioed in. All of our science experiments are running. We've got about 9 days of battery, and thankfully our transit time is something like 4 days. Maybe it's 7. I'm pretty sure it's right around 7, but yeah, I saw low battery warning. It's not this spacecraft. It's another spacecraft out there. I think that was actually our AJ-10 stage, whose battery was depleting here just an hour and 34 minutes after launch. But this one keeps right on kicking. Although I did have to bring up the resource menu just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind with all of these little warnings popping up and letting me know that batteries are dying, such and such. But we will cross the threshold into Earth space high. That will generate a little bit of science for us. Not a whole lot, because this is like the 3rd TV camera to cross that threshold and start taking pictures of whatever the hell it's taking pictures of at such a high cyclical rate here. Although I guess with the camera angled down the axis of the spin like this, yeah, nah, it's still going to give you wonky pictures, but we'll just assume that it has a, you know, a really high shutter speed. And there's the moon. What awesome imagery we're able to get from this. And up to and including a little bit of some shots here of what would be the dark side of the moon that humans just haven't been able to see up until presumably this exact point in history. Oh man, we got here in 2 days? God, that was fast. I was way off on all of my estimations. Good for me. And we'll just go ahead and ride this the rest of the way in. Like I said, it's going to be a nice glancing blow, but hopefully we're getting some very nice close-up shots right up into the point of termination here. And we put one in the win column. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next one. So until then, see you later.